Grizzly Brown on April 24, 1929 in Sydney, and passed away at the age of 59 years in 1988, also in Sydney. Brown, who stood 5 foot 6 inches, would make his professional debut at 16 years of age as a featherweight, with the highlight of his career being crowned the Commonwealth welterweight champion by defeating George Barnes in 1956. Darby made his professional debut when he scored a third-round knockout over Ron Kane at the Redfern Arena in Sydney on November 16, 1945. But he suffered a points loss in his first 8-round bout, and that was against Jimmy Redman at Sydney Stadium in November 1947. 2 weeks later, he followed that fight with a 5th-round knockout win over young Lobo at Sydney Stadium in a lightweight bout. In a 1948 lightweight bout, Brown scored a 2nd-round knockout over Eddie Mack in a scheduled 8-round bout at Leichhardt Stadium, then travelled to Brisbane Stadium, where he was matched against Jack Barclay in a 12-round bout. The referee, Pat Hill, ruled the fight a draw after the police stopped the fight in round 4. It was later changed to a no-decision bout. 1 month later in March at Sydney Stadium, Brown scored a 7th-round knockout over Toby McGarry in a scheduled 8-round bout. 2 weeks later, Darby suffered a 10-round points loss to Bernie Williams. Brown and Williams boxed a 12-round draw in April in a rematch, with most fight fans in attendance thinking Brown had won. Eddie Mack was stopped again by Brown 4 months later at Sydney Stadium, this time in round 9. But a tough fight was next against the classy Sydney boxer Bernie Hall, who proved too clever for Brown over 12 rounds, winning a points decision in Sydney. Just 17 days after the loss to Hall, the busy Brown was back in the ring at Newcastle Stadium, scoring a 10-round knockout over Mickey Anelzak in a scheduled 12. Nipper O'Brien upset Brown over 12 rounds in November in Sydney, but he rebounded to score an 8-round knockout over Jimmy McDonald at West Melbourne Stadium. Back in Sydney on January 1949, Brown scored a 7th-round knockout over Frank Donnelly in a scheduled 12. 3 days later, Jackie Wilson, who had 113 fights under his belt, held Brown to a 12-round draw at Sydney Stadium. Les Fuller upset Brown over 12 rounds in February, and Bernie Hall also defeated Brown again over 12 in August. Brown gained revenge over previous conqueror Nipper O'Brien by scoring a 10-round stoppage over the clever Gloveman in Sydney in March 1950. Inactive for 2 years, Brown returned to the ring on April 13, 1953 and dropped a 10-round decision to Billy Watson in Sydney. He was back in action in May, outpointing Cess Hart over 8 and Brian Charles over 12. In June, Brown stopped Billy Stewart in 7 rounds, and in July forced a 3-round stoppage over Leo Brennan when referee Vic Patrick ruled injury to Brennan's nose too severe to continue. Outstanding Melbourne lightweight Frank Flannery scored a 12-round decision over Brown, but he came back to stop George Cappan in 8 rounds, Frank Donnelly in 6 rounds, and Billy Watson in 3 rounds, before outscoring Mickey McDonald over 12, followed by a stoppage win over Jim Farrell to set up the most important fight to date of his career against the highly regarded Italian Luigi Caluzzi. Brown boxed at his very best to be awarded referee Vic Patrick's decision in a 12-round bout on August 23, 1954. Augustin Agotti stopped Brown in 4 rounds in Sydney, But in a rematch 7 months later, Brown defeated Argotti over 12 rounds and followed that win with an 8-round knockout over Franco Vescovi in Sydney. Aussie boxing great George Barnes defeated Brown over 12 action rounds at the Old Tin Shed in September 1955. But Darby was back in the ring 6 months later, stopping the tough Harry Grogan in 10 rounds, and followed that fight with a 2nd round knockout over Luigi Mail, which set up the rematch against George Barnes. In a classic 15-round Commonwealth title bout, challenger Darby Brown upset the champion George Barnes to be crowned the winner, a new champion, with 13,000 cheering fans in attendance at the Sydney Stadium on August 5, 1956. 3 months later, Barnes would defeat Brown over 15 rounds to regain the Commonwealth title. South African Benny Nieuwenhausen was defeated by Brown over 12 rounds in Sydney, but he would suffer a setback against Atu Clotty in April 1957 in an exciting 12-round bout. Out of action for 12 months, Brown returned to the ring at Sydney Stadium, scoring a 9th round knockout over Ray Richards, and followed that 3 weeks later with a 9th round stoppage of Billy Stanley. Joe Ngidi was outpointed over 12 by Brown in 1958, but the South African would win a rematch 1 month later. Billy Todd scored a 15-round decision over Brown to bring down the curtain on Darby's fabulous career that had seen him thrill the Australian boxing fans consistently when he was in the ring with the best lightweights and welterweights in the country and outstanding importations. Brown's final record was 38 wins, 20 losses, 4 draws with 25 KOs. The Australian Boxing Hall of Fame salutes Darby Brown for his outstanding ring achievements.
With my brother, my father's brother, and other family members. My dad was one of 8 children who had a widowed mother and had started boxing at the age of 14. At some stage, he told a lie, because what I read on the internet, he was born in 1929, but I can assure you he was born in 1931. I am told my dad was retired several times when Jack Hourigan, who was to become his manager, recognised his talent, and together with Ern Casey, turned a slugger into a boxer. My father was 25 and had 55 professional fights when he won the Australian welterweight title against George Barnes. Although he respected his opposition and rarely spoke of his boxing career, the fight he classed as the toughest were those against George Barnes. The night he won the championship, my mother, elder sister, and 50 relatives were there to support him. He was all about family, and even then, back then, I think it was displayed back then. Sadly, we have lost our dad at a young age of 57, but to us, he is and was a legend. My family are honoured and grateful for their organisations of yours to preserve and recognise the boxing history. We are very proud of our father and his boxing career, and it is nice to know it is preserved for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon and Keith, sharing beautiful words from the heart. And another round of applause, the entire extended Brown family with us tonight to accept the induction on behalf of the great Darby Brown. Our final award tonight,